The arrival of the sequel trilogy has given Star Wars fans a chance to look back at the prequel trilogy and realize that it's not that bad in comparison. But I strongly believe that the prequels have always been the best written trilogy in Star Wars, regardless of the sequels, and in this essay, I will prove that. My first argument is that the prequels are more eventful than the originals. They have more major events per minute. Why is this important? Because the more events per minute a story has, the more entertaining it is. It feels like the story is moving and there's less space. If you have two 1 hour long movies, the one with the higher event per minute will generally be more entertaining. I'll give you extreme examples. Let's say the first movie has 1 hour of a court session and the second movie has 20 different events throughout its 1 hour. With just this info, the second movie sounds more entertaining. Of course, too much of a good thing becomes bad, and stories generally want to find a sweet spot, but I believe the prequels hit that sweet spot, and the originals don't. When I look back on both trilogies, the originals are kind of boring in comparison. For this section, I'll count the major events in each movie. By that, I mean the most important events that push forward the plot, so no casual exposition or dialogue scenes. I'll do my best to count the events fairly and consistently. A New Hope is 2 hours in the special edition. Its major events are Stormtroopers vs. Rebels, the fight against the Tusken Raiders, the death of Luke's family, Mos Eisley, escaping the troopers, dealing with the Death Star, the Falcon vs. TIE Fighters, and the Rebels vs. the Death Star. Within the Death Star event, there are smaller events like escaping troopers, saving Leia, getting out of the trash compactor, and Obi-Wan vs. Vader. That's 8 major events. If I want to calculate the EPM, I can do events divided by runtime in minutes. 8 divided by 121 is 0.066. The Phantom Menace is 2 hours and 16 minutes. Its major events are the Jedi negotiations, saving Jar Jar, underwater Naboo, capturing the Senator, saving her, the pod race, Qui-Gon Jinn vs. Maul, the Republic debate, Gungan Alliance, and the final battle. Within the final battle, there's the Gungans vs. droids, the Jedi vs. the Sith, the battle in space, and the gunfight including Padme. That's 10 major events, and an EPM of 0.75, which is higher than Episode 4's. 1 is only 16 minutes longer than 4, but it fits in 2 more events. The sub-events in 1's final battle are also superior to those in the Death Star from 4. Additionally, during the lulls, 4 would have things like Force exposition or the Empire planning, meanwhile 1 had relevant politics and actual demonstrations of Jedi traditions. Examples of politics are the many scenes where Amidala is being alerted of what's happening and trying to make a decision. As for Jedi traditions, rather than a character just explaining it, we see it in action. The Council doesn't want to take Anakin because he's too old. Anakin is a living example of the prophecy and his midichlorian count is abnormally high. When Anakin is being tested, we learn that giving into emotions leads to the dark side, which is a trait the Chosen One is currently showing. The world building for the Jedi feels natural and is brought up when relevant to the plot, instead of just having info be dumped. Now the second movies. The Empire Strikes Back is 2 hours and 4 minutes. The events are Luke getting captured, Rebels vs. Empire, Falcon escaping, Luke on Dagobah, Lando's betrayal, and Luke vs. Vader. I could technically place Luke's fight under Lando's betrayal. That's 5 events, 6 if I'm generous. That makes 0.04 EPM either way. Attack of the Clones is 2 hours and 22 minutes long. The events are the attack on Amidala, stopping the assassin, Kamino, Anakin vs. Tusken Raiders, Republic debate, Anakin and Padme in the assembly line, and the final battle. Within the last battle, there's the trio versus the aliens, the Jedi versus droids, the arrival of the clone troopers, and the fight against Dooku. That's 7 events, but if I'm being generous, I could split the final battle into 4 sub-events, making 10. That makes 0.049 EPM or 0.07. In both cases, 2's is higher. Once again, the prequel is slightly longer, 18 minutes in this case. It still manages to fit in more events, 2 more if I'm strict, 4 if I'm generous. In 5's lulls, before the rebels leave the base, the scenes are actual planning among the rebels, but afterwards, it's mostly exposition. In 2, the lulls are developing Anakin's character and setting up his transition to the dark side, fleshing out the Jedi and the Council, and more politics. Finally, the third movie in each trilogy. Return of the Jedi is 2 hours and 14 minutes long. The events are saving Han, fighting troopers on Endor, getting captured by Ewoks, and the final battle. That's 4 events. Saving Han can be split into the first half of the plan, where they get captured, and the second half above the Sarlacc pit. The final battle has the fight in space, the fight on Endor, and Luke vs. the Sith. This EPM is 0.03. Revenge of the Sith is 2 hours and 20 minutes. The major events are the space battle, Obi-Wan vs. Grievous, Mace Windu vs. Palpatine, Order 66, and the final battle. That's 5 events. The space battle can be split into the starships, the fight against droids, and then Dooku. Order 66 has many sub-events, with all the Jedi being killed around the universe, and Anakin killing the younglings. The final battle includes Anakin vs Obi-Wan and Yoda vs Palpatine. The EPM is 0.035. The prequel is once again higher, and if I include sub-events, the gap would widen. During some of 6's lulls, there is good development for Vader and setting up his change, but during 3's lulls, Anakin's character arc is being developed much better and once again, politics. So in terms of objective numbers and efficiency, the prequels are superior at being entertaining. All of its movies have a higher EPM in comparison to its original counterpart, but stats don't tell the full story. What about the quality of each event? Well, I believe the prequels win in that department too. I'll start with the smallest scale, lightsaber duels. As an action story, the major events are often filled with action. Lightsaber duels are the signature of Star Wars. The duels in the prequels are far superior to the ones in the original. Any positive argument towards the quality of a fight is won by the prequels. If you want to argue with realism, the prequels have that. Lightsabers burn on touch, so the way they'd be used in real life would be similar to fencing. They wouldn't need to swing with power. Luke swings his lightsaber like a baseball bat. Meanwhile, all Jedi and Sith in the prequels go for quick taps and keep their guard up. If you want to argue spectacle, the prequels have a ton of acrobatics and flourishes in addition to the realistic combat. They are also extremely fast-paced, especially when juxtaposed against the slow duels of the originals. If you want to argue with strategy, the prequels have that too. Small things like Anakin and Obi-Wan deciding not to use the Force since their powers are equal, or Obi-Wan trying to create an opening for Qui-Gon Jinn to take down Maul, even using a head feint, are strategies absent from the originals. There is not a single duel from the original that is better than a prequel duel. From a broader view, events including vehicles and starships are superior as well. The chase in Episode 2 and the start of Episode 3 are examples of how good the execution of vehicle action has become since the originals. They are often high energy and take advantage of their advanced mastery of visual effects. Compare that to the Falcon fight in Episode 4. I could barely connect what was going on because most of the shots were up close to the characters, guns, or ships. They couldn't use wide shots to display the action in its full glory. My next argument is that the prequels had a better plot and it was more complex. Whether you look at it on an episodic level or a trilogy level, the prequels told a better story. I'll start with the trilogy level. The overarching story of the originals is a story about Luke becoming a Jedi and bringing down the Empire with the help of his friends and the rebels. Part of his journey is realizing that he could be tempted to the dark side and end up like his father, but what makes him special is his ability to resist this. In the end, the Resistance is able to turn his father to the light side and ultimately bring down the Empire. Not bad. The prequels is about a messianic young boy who was prophesied to destroy the Sith, but because he wasn't raised as a Jedi from a young age, he's basically a wild card. Qui-Gon and Obi-Wan believe in him and train him anyway, but the Chosen One is frequently known to give into his emotions and get attached, which is the way of the Sith. His powerful abilities make him arrogant. Despite the Jedi's efforts to prevent him from being too emotional, disobeying orders and unfortunate circumstances, combined with Palpatine's elite planning, lead to him willing to risk everything to prevent his wife from dying, which eventually turns him to the dark side. Anakin's story is far more complex and engaging than Luke's, and those are just the main characters. What happens when I look at everything going on? This is a movie-to-movie level. In the originals, it's mostly just the rebels trying to survive and fight back against the Empire. That is, when the rebels are even relevant, but I'll get to that later. In 4, it's Luke and the gang running away from the Empire, then saving Leia, then joining the rebels to destroy the Death Star. In 5, the rebels fight against the Empire before retreating. The rest of the movie is Han's side running away and Luke's side training. In 6, the main group saves Han, fights on Endor, and then the rebels join for a climactic battle. Compare that to the prequels. In 1, the Republic is a government body that the Jedi Council have sided with. Meanwhile, Palpatine and the Sith are manipulating the Separatists. The entire movie has diplomatic moves being made on both sides all throughout. The two main Jedi also serve as diplomats, and through their encounters with Jar Jar, they're able to help the humans of Naboo join with the Gungans during war. The Jedi also end up on Tatooine, where they meet Anakin and Qui-Gon frees him with his wits. Anakin also ends up helping in the final battle and becomes the protagonist of the trilogy. Both Jar Jar and Anakin serve as Chekhov's guns. In Episode 2, someone is trying to kill Senator Padme, so Obi-Wan tries to find the hitman. On his journey, he discovers that the Republic had ordered an army of clones to be made. While there, he meets Jango Fett, the hitman, but is unable to bring him down. Meanwhile, Anakin and Padme are falling in love, but this goes against both of their roles. Jedi aren't supposed to have attachments and a senator isn't supposed to have romantic relations, but both go through with it anyway and keep their relationship a secret. Meanwhile, Count Dooku's doing his own politicking, and the main trio ends up captured in his clutches. This is when the Jedi Army and Clone Army make their appearance to save the day. In Episode 3, the Jedi duo rescues Palpatine and Anakin kills Dooku. Anakin begins to have dreams of Padme dying and doesn't want this to happen. Palpatine begins to tempt Anakin with the power to save his wife. Anakin realizes that Palpatine is a Sith Lord and reports him. Meanwhile, Obi-Wan is dealing with General Grievous on the battlefield. When Mace Windu is about to kill Palpatine, the latter tempts the Chosen One once more, resulting in Windu's death and Palpatine's survival. Then Order 66 happens, Anakin vs Obi-Wan, and the birth of Darth Vader. There are so many more moving pieces in the prequels, and this creates a significantly higher level of engagement and content compared to the originals. Anakin's character arc was illustrated beautifully. There were so many hints that something would go wrong with him. He wasn't part of the Jedi from a young age, so he's less predictable. His insanely high midichlorian count and skills made him arrogant and brash. His temper and solid belief in his own worldview can be seen several times in 2 and 3. He often thinks he's right or that he deserves more without ever stepping back to see others' point of view. He was told that attachment led to the dark side, yet he gets a wife and kids behind the council's back. He's unable to accept the impending death of his wife, despite Yoda trying to give him a positive outlook. All of these traits combined allowed him to be seduced by the dark side and go against his prophecy in the moment. The Order 66 plot twist was also the most genius one in Star Wars. The scheme was hidden so well in the universe. The clone troopers were absolute beasts who got the job done and turned the tides of the war in the Republic's favor. With the way they saved the day in the second movie, what kind of paranoid person would expect them to be soldiers that were always secretly meant to turn on the Jedi? They were so helpful, which is what made the betrayal lethal. But when Obi-Wan was investigating, there were some weird details. Kamino's coordinates being erased, the Jedi who requested for the army being long gone, and the fact that the person who tried to kill Padme was the one who was being cloned. Sadly, none of the Jedi looked into this in time. The biggest plot twists in the originals were Darth Vader being Luke's father and Luke and Leia being siblings. Both kind of feel like retcons, and the second just makes things awkward. The first at least serves as a relevant plot point in the 6th movie. A trait that allowed the prequels to have a more complex plot was the character usage. The prequels had more plot-relevant characters than the originals. In Luke's trilogy, it honestly feels like it's Luke, Leia, and Han versus the Empire. Almost every time the rebels appear, they're losing. In the end of 4, they're failing and Luke has to blow up the Death Star with his Force instincts. In the beginning of 5, they trip that one walker, but then they're forced to retreat. The end of 6 is the only time they are victorious without the main characters. Lando and the rebels blow up the new Death Star alone. But as I explained before, in most of the trilogy, the rebels are either losing or irrelevant. If you removed Luke and Han, the rebels wouldn't have stood a chance. In addition to that, how many heroes and villains can you name? For heroes, Luke, Leia, Han, Lando, and Obi-Wan as a stretch. Villains, Darth Vader, and Sidious. I'm not counting C-3PO or R2-D2. That's 6 characters, 7 if I'm stretching. That's a small amount for 3 movies. The same can't be said about the prequels. Let's start with heroes and villains. Heroes, Qui-Gon, Obi-Wan, Padme, Jar Jar, Anakin, Yoda, Windu, and if I want to flex my Clone Wars memory, I can add Kit Fisto, Plo Koon, Shaak Ti, and Barriss Offee. None of them are named, but they can be seen in action in both 2 and 3. Villains, Palpatine, Darth Maul, Jango Fett, Count Dooku, General Grievous, and Anakin. Although I didn't remember his name, I could add Newt Gunray as a stretch because he's a pretty major antagonist on the political side of Phantom Menace. That's 12 if I'm not counting Anakin twice, and 17 if I'm stretching. That's double the originals, and is because every prequel movie introduces new primary antagonists rather than sticking with the same ones. Palpatine is always in the background, but Maul and Newt are in 1, Dooku and Jango are in 2, and Grievous and Anakin are in 3. The prequels have several mini-bosses before getting to the main boss, and these mini-bosses aren't forgettable nobodies. They have striking designs and memorable personalities. Darth Maul looks like a devil and has his signature 2-headed lightsaber. Grievous is an android with 4 arms, each equipped with lightsabers taken from his fallen enemies. Jango Fett is a bounty hunter with cool armor who actually does something in his trilogy. Dooku looks like an old man, but his skills are contradictory to his appearance. Now for the argument of removing the main heroes. If you remove Anakin and Obi-Wan, the main heroes of the prequels, the Republic still has Yoda, Mace Windu, Plo Koon, Kit Fisto, Shaak Ti, Barriss Offee, and other Jedi, and all the clone troopers. The rebels rarely accomplish things on their own, meanwhile the clone troopers are walking lifesavers. Anakin and Obi-Wan aren't carrying the Republic or the Jedi Council. They are just additional cogs in the machine. You can argue that they're the most useful, but you can't argue the Republic would have collapsed without them. Character quality is equal. The Anakin and Obi-Wan duo is just as good as, if not better than, the Luke, Leia, Han trio. Individually, the prequel duo is great. I already explained Anakin's character. Obi-Wan is the safe foil to Anakin's brashness. He's a charismatic, witty, and wise ally that Anakin can bounce off of. He is more by the book, while Anakin is a rule breaker. These opposing traits make them entertaining together. The two have a master and student relationship, but also a strong friendship, which makes Anakin's betrayal cut deep. Luke and Han have a similar hero and lancer relationship at the start, but after they get split up in the 5th movie, things are never the same. Han rarely interacts with Luke and focuses most of his time on Leia. Leia does the same thing to Luke, so now it feels like Luke is just a third wheel to their duo. Their duo isn't even that good, but I'll cover that later. Han and Leia are okay individually. They both have distinct personalities, the former being a rowdy criminal, and the latter being a leader with a strong attitude. I've seen Anakin and Padme's relationship get shot at, but I've never seen the same energy towards the originals. The romance in the originals was a disaster overall. Luke, Leia, and Han were one of the worst love triangles I've ever seen. I'm gonna go over all of the scenes in detail just so you know how bad the romance was. When the team is getting shot at by stormtroopers until they fall in the garbage, Leia and Han are bickering and bantering. After they get out, they argue some more. When Luke swings across the gap, she kisses him for luck. Han and Leia argue again after they shoot down the ships and Luke tries to get on her good side by saying, "I care." Then the two guys have a painful conversation about what they think of her and whether Han has a chance. That's not too bad overall, but it's not good. Han and Leia just argue. Luke has a hard-on for Leia, and Leia kisses Luke just to tease the audience with a love triangle. The next movie gets worse. When Han is leaving, he tries to imply that Leia likes him when he says mushy. When Leia says the rebels need him, he tries to force her to say that she needs him, which she denies. Who does that? Who wrote this? If it was executed in a more charismatic, smooth, or cheeky way, I could see this dialogue actually being pulled off, but Han sounds and looks legitimately angry. This is embarrassing. When Luke wakes up, Han tries to argue that Leia likes him again, this time more smoothly. When he makes her angry, she kisses Luke as retaliation. What kind of childish behavior is this? In The Falcon, they bicker even more. When hiding, they fall on each other like some harem anime. Han says she likes him, she denies it. Han's line, "I haven't got time for anything else," was actually pretty smooth, so I'll give him credit for that. But the next scene isn't so lucky. He tries to help her with fixing the ship and shifts into acting like a normal person and being reflective. But when she gets hurt, he goes into massaging her hand and basically forcing a kiss on her, all while continuing his "you like me" routine. This is not romantic, all they do is argue. Up until now, this is the only scene where they've been even remotely friendly. Their chemistry hasn't been properly set up for romance. On Cloud City, Han keeps cock-blocking Lando from getting close to Leia. He holds her hand at the start and even kisses her forehead later, so somehow they went from constantly arguing to being in a relationship. Finally, before he gets frozen, she says she loves him. Meanwhile, Luke completely gives up on her. Overall, this relationship lacked any real chemistry and shifted from hatred to love at the speed of light. Han's forcefulness in trying to make her admit her love was very cringy, especially when he tried with no class. His attempts got smoother as the story went on, but the fact that at least 50% and at most 90% of their interactions were "you like me" and "no I don't" is a pathetic excuse for a romantic story. Anakin and Padme aren't amazing, but they're nowhere near as bad. Anakin meets her when he's a kid and finds her attractive. Years later, when they are both adults, Anakin wants to get with her, but she's hesitant because of their statuses. Anakin respects her boundaries, but both eventually decide that they want a relationship anyway and are willing to keep it a secret. They have several cordial and amicable scenes together that it doesn't feel unbelievable when the author tries to make their relationship romantic. Their chemistry is actually competent. Neither one of them is forcing themselves on the other or forcing the other to admit their feelings for them. There is no poorly done love triangle either. I briefly talked about themes when I dissected the journeys of each protagonist in each trilogy. I'd say that the original's overarching theme is that there is good in most people, or everyone, and the prequel's overarching theme is that not being able to properly process your emotions will lead to negative results. These are mostly based off of the final movie of each trilogy, but if you know 3-act structure, the climax, in the 3rd act, is where the theme of the story should shine brightest. I don't think either of the themes are inherently better, but I do believe that the prequels executed theirs much better, due to the complexity of Anakin's plot and character. When it comes to setting, the prequels are better. I already talked about the plot complexity and character usage, but the existence of both naturally leads to a rich and plentiful setting. I talked about the politics and the council enough already, so I'll look at something new, the planets. Star Wars is a sci-fi story that holds its wide galaxy as one of its strongest and most iconic features. It'd be difficult to argue that the prequels didn't do more for the setting than the originals did. How many planets were visited during Luke's trilogy? Tatooine, Yavin 4, Hoth, Dagobah, Bespin, and Endor. That's 6. What about Anakin's trilogy? Naboo, Coruscant, Tatooine, Kamino, Geonosis, Utapu, Kashyyyk, and Mustafar. That's 8. I actually left out some from episode 3 because I can't even remember when or how they were used. So planet count is another place where the prequels are superior. Even if you were to include repeated planets between movies, the prequels would still win. People like to bring up plot holes in the prequels, but the originals have them too. I don't personally care too much about plot holes as long as the rest of the story is fine, so that's as far as I'll go on that. So based on my analysis, the prequels are better than the originals in all of the important ways, and honestly, the unimportant ones as well. The reason I felt so compelled to make this video is because of how they changed my view on Star Wars. I have no nostalgia for this franchise because I only started watching the films when I was an adult. I watched the cartoons like Clone Wars and Rebels. I had fond memories of the former, but they were very foggy. When the sequels came out, I finally decided it was time to watch the movies and get the original experience. I watched episode 7, then the original trilogy. I was so unimpressed by any of them that I began to slander Star Wars. I said things like the best thing to come out of Star Wars was the lightsaber and Clone Wars. But then I decided to go back and check out the Clone Wars in chronological order. After a few arcs, I quit because I wasn't enjoying it. It felt so lifeless. So now my slander was reduced to lightsabers are the only good thing to come from Star Wars. I wasn't going to watch the prequels because everyone said they were terrible. But when one of my friends said he was going to watch them, I decided to see for myself and not just trust the words of others. These movies blew my mind. I couldn't believe they were from the same franchise as the others. It honestly angers me that any of these movies ever received any hate from overgrown toddlers and man-children. The prequels are elite. Now I can no longer slander Star Wars because the best thing to come from it is a legendary trilogy. If you like my analysis style, be sure to check out my videos on story theory. Story theory aims to be to stories what music theory is to music, an optimal way of critiquing and creating stories based on the research of many greats before. That's what I used to create this essay, except I simplified it and used more universal terms rather than my specific ones. As of now, everyone has their own rules for critiquing and creating stories. Some people have gems of info, others have detrimental advice. I aim to combine all the gems from many different sources I can find, like books from Robert McKee or John Truby, and YouTube videos from video essayists. Thank you for watching. Please like, comment, share, subscribe, and help me revolutionize the manga industry by buying my manga and spreading the word. All important links will be in the description.